So we have another awesome person up here, Caren Cooper, who is professor now at North Carolina State University and is director at the North Carolina Museum of Science. And what's that?
Close.
North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. There you go. I should have read it. Some museum down in Raleigh. And so she, but she is also a scholar. She's a well-known blogger, which is very impressive. You just search her name in Google and you will find tons of things that she's said and thought. And we are going to now move from all the opportunities that citizen science can pose to think a little bit more about some of the historical context, maybe a little, and a little of everything when it comes to citizen science and where we might go. So without further ado,
Great.
Caren Cooper.
Thanks, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah, so can you hear me? I have to hold it like this. Or can I wear it?
You can wear it.
As long as I don't go far.
I'll be quick.
Should it? Oh.
You can just click it right.
How does it?
I think it is a little easier right there. If you'll allow me. There we go. There we are. I'm going to.
I don't want to hold it because I'll be doing like this.
Yes, are we good there?
Okay, I hope so.
Yeah.
I was trying to think how to approach the talk today because I know everyone probably has different levels of familiarity with citizen science. How many people are really familiar with citizen science? Oh, good. Okay, good. So, I mean, what I have found is that there's a lot of myths about citizen science or misconceptions, and so I thought I would structure this to be sort of about dispelling some of the common myths. And is that volume related? Anyway, right now, citizen science is in really almost every discipline that I've been looking in. So it's really growing rapidly. And I guess I'll add that. So what I hope to do with this talk, and I hope that by the end, we'll all start to think a little bit differently about systems of knowledge production. Because I think that's really like at the heart of citizen science. And that we'll start to think maybe a little differently about who can make knowledge, about where that happens, about who it's intended to serve, and realize that how we answer these questions of knowledge production really matters in how we go about addressing societal issues. Irrespective of what field you're in. And so I'm not going to focus on trees, I'm going to focus more broadly, but it's all relevant to citizen science. So like I said, I'm going to focus on these different misconceptions because I think when we identify those, then we can it'll inform our best practices. And I actually had a hugely long list, so I tried to narrow it down to these 10. Like, for instance, this idea that it's free. How many people, when they think of citizen science and you think of your volunteers, think of it as free? Some people. I encounter a lot of people think, oh, well, it's at least cheap. How many people think it's an expensive way to do research? I don't know if some people might know Andrea Wiggins. She's a professor at Maryland, and she wrote a paper that was called something like Citizen Science, Free Like Puppies. So yeah, you can be given a puppy for free, but then you've got to get it its shots and get it spayed and take care of it and spend time with it. And that's what it's like with participants. And also, I mean, one of the other things is that, well, it's expensive on both ends. This is eBird, which is sort of an iconic, awesome citizen science project. There's tens of thousands of people who are bird watchers who contribute their observations to the eBird database, and we get maps like this that are show this one is the distribution of indigo buntings over the course of the year. I think it'll go do that again. And but anyway, but the cyber infrastructure for this is tremendous, right? I mean, it's been many millions of dollars going into building it, and there's statisticians and information technology specialists, and as well as ornithologists, all kinds of people working on that cyber infrastructure. And then on the front end, in terms of managing the bird watchers and giving feedback and making sure they're following protocols, it's just a huge, huge undertaking when it's done in a really large-scale way. Another misconception is that it's new. And what I like to talk about a little bit is just the history in citizen science. And some people will say, oh, well, of course it's old because before there was professional scientists, everyone was an amateur scientist. And I think, okay, sure, there were amateur scientists, but that's the precursors to professional scientists. But really, there were also citizen science efforts in the sense that there was distributed networks of volunteers sending data to a centralized place. Even before the internet, even before smartphones, before all this. And one example that I like, and sorry that it doesn't show up that well here, is one that William Whewell did in 1835. And it was called the Great Tide Experiment. And he arranged for people on both sides of the Atlantic at the same time in a synchronized way to take tide measurements. And there was over 650 stations, and they collected the tide measurements every 15 minutes, at the same 15 minutes, day and night for 2 weeks straight, right? And he wanted to draw these co-tidal lines. So he was like, oh, well, when it's high tide in England, in London, is it low tide in Boston? He wanted to see if it worked that way. Anyway, so if you do the math, though, well, for one, it's amazing he scheduled people to do something in all those places at the same time, because I can't even meet my daughter after school without texting her like 2 seconds beforehand. And then two, he ended up with that's almost 1 million observations that were sent to him, and that was before computers. Well, he had computers. That's actually what computers were before. They were people. He had people who were literally called his computers that he hired that knew how to do calculus. So anyway, so it's an old practice. It's been around a long time. It's just that it's coming of age, and now with technologies, there's amazing things that we can do in more real time that we couldn't do before. Okay, another misconception that I hear a lot, it really rubs me the wrong way sometimes, is when people say, well, it's just this education thing. It's an outreach, isn't it? And so I'm an ornithologist, and most, like 90% of my research is based on citizen science, data collected from citizen science projects. It's how I do my research. And so I like to emphasize the scientific outcomes from citizen science, and I'll just take a couple minutes, I guess, to do that. Because even when it involves kids, and it might look like it's just educational outreach, it's still rigorous research. Like the Lost Ladybug Project, which is run out of, it's administered through Cornell, was looking for the 9-spotted ladybug. Well, it's sort of related to plant, whatever. I was trying to link it to trees, but I can't. Anyway, it was found by this girl, Allison, out in Oregon. And those mugs that her and her mom are holding, they're actually full of these 9-spotted ladybugs. So they didn't just find one. They found like these huge populations that researchers then were able to take into captivity, and they did some studies with, because these are actually tinier. But anyway, so in a lot of fields, like we can ask these questions. I often ask people, actually, how do you think we know that birds are breeding earlier now? How do we even know the climate is changing? Where do those data come from? Or that there's a Jupiter-sized planet that could support life around another star? Or that monarch butterflies migrate 4,000 miles to Mexico from Canada? Or that there's an invasive mosquito species that's arrived in Germany? That extracts from periwinkle can treat diabetes? Or that monk seals are attempting to colonize the Eastern Mediterranean Sea? Or that right now there's about 50 types of bacteria living in your belly button? And often when I ask people, well, how do we know things? Well, if they're scientific facts or whatever, people say, oh, well, this is knowledge from scientists. You know, everything we know is thanks to scientists. But there's other ways of knowing. And so actually, indigenous knowledge is another way of knowing. And does anyone want to guess which of those is knowledge from indigenous communities? It's not the belly button. It's the... Nope, not the monarch. The periwinkle, yeah, actually that periwinkle. It was a big case with Eli Lilly, actually, because they took it to make medicines, and it was about who should benefit from that. Anyway, but all the rest is things that we know thanks to citizen science efforts, right? And it goes by many names. It's often not called citizen science. For a while, there was a movement to call it PPSR, Public Participation in Scientific Research, or PISR. But there's volunteer monitoring, volunteer recorders. There often is used in England, community-based participatory research, a whole bunch of things, participatory forestry. There's a lot of different mapping, community mapping kind of things, a lot of different names for it, whatever, arose by any other name. now we're sort of putting it all under this umbrella of citizen science. All these different ways and styles that people participate in some kind of discovery. And I published this paper a couple years ago with colleagues. We just looked at what is known about birds, migratory birds, and climate change. And we actually based it on a paper by Knudsen they did all the hard work. They did this huge literature review, and they synthesized these 10 claims about migratory birds and climate change. And there were these were things that were 10 things that they found supported in the literature. And then so we just went through that literature, and we looked to see what was citizen science based and what wasn't. And that's the percentages I have there. So each of these claims had roughly 20 to 30 papers that backed it up. And the percentages there are the percent of those papers that were citizen science. And so it varies. Some of them were just as low as 24% of the papers, and some of them as high as 77% of the papers. On average, it was half. Half of what we know about birds and climate change is thanks to citizen science. I mean, and you can imagine why that would be, right? Because this is long time scales, spans more than any one scientist's career, large spatial scales where you have bird watchers everywhere. And anyway, but what was interesting, does anyone want to guess how many of those papers used the term citizen science? Anybody want to guess?
0.
You all read my paper. Right. Okay, right, 0. None of them use the term citizen science. And we had to read every single one. And some use the term volunteer or bird watcher or this or that. It was usually in the acknowledgments that we had to read to figure out that it was citizen science. Sometimes we had to contact the authors. One of the authors that I asked, she's like, I have no idea. It was a public database. I have no idea who collected it. I was like, okay. All right, let's not let the skeptics find that out. Anyway, so it's very prevalent, and it's advancing scientific research for a long time. And the other thing about it is that the discoveries are different. It's not redundant with what scientists do. It's often a whole sphere of discovery that is not otherwise possible by regular science. And it informs decision making in a very different way. And this is it's one of my favorite papers. It's by Finn Danielson. And what he did was synthesize literature on what he calls environmental monitoring or participatory monitoring. So this is generally citizen science done with communities who are sort of who are involved heavily in managing their natural resources. And he compared projects where the monitoring was done exclusively by scientists. So they would go and they would monitor the fish or the plants or whatever, versus projects that were done with participatory monitoring, where the communities would work with scientists and they would monitor things together. And this is what he found. So this bottom axis is the time from when the data was collected until it informed some kind of decision about natural resource management. And you can see that when it was communities that were involved, decisions happened usually within a year. But when scientists were involved, it took decades before something happened. And then the scale of that decision was very different too. So with scientists, it was generally something international. It was like some UN proclamation or declaration of something. I mean, they're important, and I don't want to belittle it, but it never was relevant at the local level. But when people were involved, those decisions happened quickly, and they happened at the household level, the village level, the town. Like, it was very relevant to people's lives, and people made a difference. And I think that illustrates a bit just the difference between traditional scientific research and when we involve people. Okay, just moving along here to some of the myths. So another one is that the data quality sucks. And I get that all the time. And even after I present all those scientific outcomes and, hey, half of what we know about birds and climate change, oh, but the data quality is terrible. I'm like, okay, do you trust those peer reviews? But anyway, there's a lot of issues that go on with data quality. So it's a hugely complex topic. But one of the things I like to emphasize, especially in natural history fields, is that there is a lot of amateur expertise. And I don't mean amateur in any derogatory sense. It's just that there's a lot of expertise among non-professionals. But some of the trick is to really be able to write our protocols and design our projects so people understand them. I don't know who's a parent who's read Amelia Bedelia to their kids. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Amelia Bedelia is this house cleaner, and the people are always busy, so they just leave her a note that tells her what to do. And the joke is she misreads everything. She misinterprets everything. So they say, draw the curtains when the sun comes in. And so she'll sit down and draw the curtains. And that's how I feel like when I write protocols. It's like, no, whatever. So it's a whole skill in and of itself. But there are these amateur expertise. And one of my favorite projects with that is iSpot. It's a little similar to iNaturalist, which you might be familiar with, but this one's based in England. And it's basically this social network that doesn't expect everyone to be an expert on everything, but it connects people with these expertise. So there's your plant expert and your beetle expert and your fungus expert. And people post pictures and it gets identified and everybody helps each other out. And one of my favorite examples from that is there was a doctor in South Africa and a parent rushed in with 3 kids who were sick, held out some seeds and said they ate these. He's like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what these are. So he took a picture, he put it on iSpot, and within 30 seconds he had his first identification, and within 2 minutes he had 2 more confirmations. So then he knew what it was, and he was able to treat them. And and the average response time for identifying stuff is about 2 minutes on iSpot. But even without that kind of expertise, if you design your project right, almost anybody can do it. And these are prisoners. There's a lot of incarcerated citizen science that is happening. This is at Walla Walla State Penitentiary. And the prisoners actually who are lifers are doing things like, I mean, it's cliche, they have time on their hands. Some citizen science just takes a lot of time. And rearing monarch butterflies for tagging and release is one of those. It's not typically what's done, but they're in very low densities out west and they want to see where they migrate to. Anyway, so that's one of the examples of citizen science projects. So there's things that anybody can do, even non-literate communities. Like, I don't know if people remember this movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy. Environmentalists, we used to be so anti-technology. Anyway, and what's funny to me is it seems like such fiction to me now, because now it's citizen science. When you give technology to Kalahari Bushmen, they actually use it for citizen science. And they are a non-literate community. They don't have any written language. And so this GPS unit that they use, it's all symbols, tracking symbols. I mean, they read animal signs, right? And so that's what's on there. And they're really actually preserving their indigenous knowledge. And that same system, CyberTracker, is used by pygmy people in the Congo. And it's really to give them a voice in the forest management that's happening there. So they can go and GPS, and again with these icons, document the locations of all their sacred and important areas so that they're not taken in these, so that can be incorporated into the logging plans. So I'm just saying there's a whole spectrum. We just need to shift our ideas about this whole idea about expertise and what it really involves. Another common myth or misconception is that it's always about natural history observations. A lot of us might think of citizen science as birds and butterflies and plants. But there's actually a lot of it that is about bringing a lot of minds together, or even a lot of computers together. Darlene mentioned this a little bit. There's distributed computing networks where there's a lot of problems right now, especially in biochemistry, that need massive amounts of computing to figure them out. And the most powerful computer is a network of computers. And so this Berkeley Center is one that's really big. And people often think of it as like a low effort thing. Oh, you just hook up your computer. Do we really think of them as citizen scientists? But actually they're heavily invested. And I don't know if people have heard of overclockers, like this guy. Okay, overclockers are people that invest thousands and thousands of dollars in their computer systems to beef them up. I mean, and they'll use liquid nitrogen to cool them. They'll do all kinds of stuff because they want it to perform as best as possible. And then they compete with these distributed computing networks. So like, if it was the 1950s, he'd be souping up his car, right? And then he'd be drag racing it, like in Greece or whatever. But now these overclockers, and they are typically these guys, they beef up their computers. But there's also fandoms that are involved. So you might know fandoms like Trekkies or Potterheads. They like to dress up. They like to share creative things on the internet, right? So there's this idea Clay Shirky wrote about called cognitive surplus. and that we don't just like to sit and maybe watch TV anymore, but more and more people with the internet are really wanting to be creative and to share. And that's what a lot of these, so like you can still read about Harry Potter, right? There's still stories, it's fan fiction, right? So fans write about it. And so they generally share art. One of the big ones in citizen science, right? So they don't just want, they like want to do more meaningful things. So a lot of the fandoms are also in citizen science. And Brony at Home, are people familiar with Bronies? They're usually young guys that really like My Little Pony, that show for little girls. But they sincerely love the art and whatever. But anyway, they have a team, and it's top of the charts in distributed computing, especially with Rosetta at Home, which is about protein folding. And a lot of diseases we now know are caused, seemingly unrelated diseases really, are caused by misfolds of proteins. Alzheimer's disease, I can't even remember them all. I think MS, there's a bunch of stuff. Anyway, so it takes these distributed computing networks. But what's cool is so basically you do attach your computer, and then when it goes into screen saving mode, it starts working out these distributed computing problems. And the screensaver for Rosetta at Home, you could see the computer try to figure out the protein fold. It's a three-dimensional problem. And people said, they were watching it, and they were like, oh my gosh, I feel like I could solve it better than this computer. And the researchers, to their credit, they listened, and they said, okay, do it. And they worked with a gamer, and they made a game called Fold It. And so this is a distributed thinking project. And people work together, often in teams, and they do figure out these protein folds. And they are better than the computers, because we are creative, and we have imagination, and computers don't. And so actually people are better at it. And there's been a lot of big discoveries, including related to the AIDS virus, that had come from out of Fold It. Anyway, so I'm just trying to say it's not always people giving observations. There's ways that people are tapped for their computer power, for their mental power, all kinds of ways that people participate in citizen science. And a lot of people think that it's like usually a scientist with many volunteers. Well, for one, it's never just a scientist. It's usually a whole team of people with a whole bunch of different skills working. But sometimes it's not these big crowdsourced projects. You know, sometimes it's groups with a bucket and very low tech, like Bucket Brigade folks, or like this group in Tonawanda, New York, Jackie James Creedon and her neighbors, and they use these buckets you can get from Home Depot, and you get a special little bag, and you take air samples. And they took air samples, it was one air sample in their neighborhood, and they sent it to the lab, and it had exceedingly high levels of benzene, and it triggered the EPA to fund some studies to triangulate in on the source. And it sent this guy to jail, because he was intentionally releasing benzene from Tonawanda Coke factory. And that was the first time that an industry fellow was sentenced in criminal court and served jail time for polluting. And the environmental justice movement, this is in North Carolina actually, the birth of a lot of it, has been going on a long time. And it used to always be that people would go to jail to try to stop polluting. And now with the citizen science efforts like this, I think it'll be more and more common that people will go to jail for polluting. But anyway, it comes in many forms. But because it sometimes involves sending people to jail or dealing with watchdog on industry, some people say, oh, but there's a conflict of interest. And this was actually written up in Nature. There was I don't know if people saw this. Allison's like, I remember that. It caused a big brouhaha among the citizen science community. So I'll just read it really quickly. This editor at Nature wrote all this praise about citizen science, all the high-tech citizen science, and then he switches and he goes, but more troubling perhaps is the potential for conflicts of interest. One reason that some citizen scientists volunteer is to advance their political objectives. Opponents of fracking, for example, might help to track possible pollution because they want to gather evidence of harmful effects. It's like, I mean, I can tell you, nobody wants to have the pollution, right? But if it's there, yeah, you want to document it. And then they said, when Australian scientists asked people who had volunteered to monitor koala populations how the animals should be managed, they found that the citizen scientists had strong views on protection that did not reflect broader public opinion. the citizen scientists had really informed views. So yeah, they were different from the general public. And that's that Nature editorial and this koala count, what they're referring to is the koala count. And yeah, they surveyed people who participated in the project and the public, and it was different. And their views were different because they had become really well informed about all the options for koala management. I mean, I was really surprised actually because koalas are so cute, but they're like deer there, and a lot of people just want to cull them, and they cause a lot of problems and whatever. Okay, and anyway, so Nature calls this conflict of interest. I call it broader impacts. Whatever, tomato, tomato. But anyway, this is my favorite illustration of it is with Earthwatch has this partnership with HSBC Bank, and they send their top level CEOs on these Earthwatch expeditions on this biggest project studying climate change and carbon sequestration of trees. It's trees. They do. They study trees and carbon. And anyway, what I love is that all these CEOs, they all get their picture taken like this, like, my hands are dirty, because they all are like manicured hands. But I know how they feel, because, I mean, I don't know how many people do field work. Like, I was like, okay, imagine if I, for a week, had to wear like a suit or whatever, or heels for like a week. It must be what it's like for them in the field for a week with their hands dirty. Anyway, what's amazing is that people go into this some of them have gone in as climate change deniers and come out. Well, they have like 100% success rate. Everyone comes out of that program wanting to make sustainable solutions and thinking and believing climate change is a real problem. And they have the power to make like tons of changes in their programs. There's one guy that did it, and he has like 500 hotels across Southeast Asia that he controls the loans for. And he wrote in there, he's like, green practices. We want green water, water systems efficient, and electricity efficiency, all these things, and he was able to put it into all these hotels. Anyway, what is amazing to me about this is that it's one of the few projects where the people are not self-selected. In most citizen science and the studies that you'll see, it's people self-selecting, right? They're volunteering. And so they already have a proclivity for and kind of a conservation commitment. So it's sometimes hard to see the effects of citizen science on top of it. But this project, they have to go and do it. So it's a non-self-selected group, and the outcomes are tremendous. So anyway, so when we get a system where there is new knowledge being made, and we sort of get this social capital, which is sort of these networks and community cohesion and all the things that make democracy work better, you get those things together, and we get environmental justice and conservation outcomes. And I think that's just a powerful combination, and I'll just go really quick through some of these. So some people say that they think that citizen science is great because there's learning because people interact with the scientist. But there's a lot of studies that are showing now that actually most people are learning in citizen science from their peers. And so it's really good when citizen science projects enable that ability for people to talk to one another. But also, scientists are learning from people too. And my favorite example of that is with Flint water, right? So how many people think of the Flint water crisis as a citizen science project? Some people? Okay, because some people are like, oh, I never thought of that. But this was people testing their water. And they actually initiated it, and they went to Mark Edwards at Virginia Tech. I mean, he studies plumbing stuff. He's an engineer, but he wasn't studying, it wasn't his study system. They came to him and said, we have a problem. And he listened, and he set up the study with them. He said, fine, we can study it together. And more scientists are doing that and listening to the public and adjusting their research agendas accordingly. Like Steve Wing, he's at the School of Public Health at UNC, and he studies air pollution around hog farms, among other things, because the community came to him and said, we need this addressed. Julia Brody at the Silent Spring Institute. This whole institute was formed out of public interest. And it was because the public said, where's all the cancer research about preventing cancer, about environmental causes of cancer? Everything is about a cure or the genetics. Everything is pharmaceutical related and driven when we study cancer. They said, we want to stop cancer. So they fund that institute that Julia Brody runs, and they study the environmental causes. And so when you see that PBH or whatever it's called, like not in water bottles anymore, it's thanks to them, because they're starting to tackle these issues of these are our environmental causes. And some of us, our colleague Mookie, and he's a geographer, and he studies, I look at his papers and it was like all over the map, and I was like, Mookie, how do you decide what to study? And he goes, oh, it's easy. I go to a community, I sit at a cafe, and I talk to people. So he bases it on communities. Anyway, a lot of people think that it's citizen science is democratizing science because it's all people participating equally. But I just want to emphasize that actually there's tremendous skew in participation. And people shouldn't get discouraged by that, though. So what I mean by skew, it's kind of like Wikipedia. How many people here use Wikipedia and read Wikipedia? Yeah, we all do, right? How many people here add new content or are an editor for Wikipedia? Right. Okay. So it's only it's a very small percentage of people. And so it's called the Pareto principle. And we see that in citizen science. Like that eBird project, 90% of the data come from 10% of the bird watchers. It's a huge amount of skew. A lot of projects have that, but it's not a bad thing. It can actually make the data quality really good. And what we're starting to see is that there's a lot of peripheral learning, that people who are less engaged, maybe they're not contributing to the science quite as much, but they are having those social outcomes and those broader impacts. But it's an active area of research. And actually, that's why citizen science right now is a subject of study of many disciplines, from information sciences, informal science education, human-computer interactions, STS studies, all kinds of things. And that's why we have these associations. Okay, citizen science, as Rebecca Jordan's paper says, is like a distinct area of inquiry. And we have the Citizen Science Association, and, okay, well, I'm not. Okay. And we have European Association, Australian Association, the Federal Community of Practice, all these organizations coming to study citizen science and help us to do it better. And SciStarter 2.0 is going to be this awesome, well, it is an awesome platform, but it's going to be an awesome research platform as we're modifying it to actually help us understand and improve that better. And then, yeah, I don't know if they're going to pull me off of here. I did have one more. It kind of gets at the heart of it. Some people say it's exploitation. And I have these two stories that I kind of compare, because there are different ways of doing it. So it's, I mean, I don't think it's exploitation, but that it's not some, well, anyway, Tom Sawyer is one of them. So people know about him and tricking his friends into paying him or giving him apples and whatnot so that they could do his work of whitewashing the fence. And sometimes citizen science might look like that, like with William Whewell, who had people do those measurements of the tide. But people still liked to do it. I mean, he was an eminent scientist, and they were able to help him. But there is another model. I have to admit, I entered citizen science with this mindset. I started citizen science. I started being engaged in it because I had kids, and I didn't want to do field work anymore myself. And so I thought, yeah, I'll just have all the bird watchers do it. They'll love it. They'll do my work. But he called his participants subordinate laborers, which doesn't catch on anymore. And he coined a lot of, he actually coined the term scientist. But this one, fortunately, didn't catch on. But it kind of gets at how this hierarchy of how he felt about it. And he did define science in a very hierarchical way. But there's another way that it's done, and that's more like stone soup. And I don't know if people know this story, but it's like these monks go into a village. It's a war-torn village. People don't trust each other. Nobody has enough food for a meal. And they make a pot of water. They add some stones, and they say, we're going to serve stone soup tonight, and it's going to be great, and everyone's going to love it. And people think, oh, well, that's not going to taste very good. And so little by little, people come out, and they're like, okay, I have a few carrots I can share. Another person comes out, here's some potatoes I can share. Here's some onions. Here's some dumplings, like whatever it is. And together, everyone chips in just a little bit. And so by the end of the day, they do have this amazing feast. And I think that some citizen science is more like that, where it's for like a common purpose. And I'm just going to give this example with Matthew Murray. But I will say that right now, the Smithsonian Transcription Center, they have come up with this term that I really like, just put it out there, called volunteers, which I think it's cool. People think it's a typo, but it conveys this sort of dynamic that, no, we're actually all in this together. It's not hierarchical. And what Matthew Murray did with these maps, which you can't really see well, but they were about the wind and currents of the oceans. And he got the information from sailors. And he had specialized logbooks that sailors would fill in and send back to him, because he made the sailing so much safer. Because it was really a risky endeavor. And he wrote to the former president, Adams, at the time, and he said, these charts are to generalize the experience of navigators in such a manner that each may have before him, at a glance, the experience of all. Right? Because what more wisdom could you want? And it made sailors right, go from, oh my gosh, we almost ran into that rocky shore. Why? Oh, I don't know, because we set sail on a Tuesday. So like they had all these. I mean, they're like the most superstitious bunch, sailors were. And he helped them really bring scientific rigor to what they do. And one of them wrote to him and said, "Until I took up your work, I had been traversing the ocean blindfolded." And I think, so I'm over time, but I always end with this cartoon sequence. It goes really quickly. I'm going to end with a cartoon sequence that sums it up. So this following message will be told by stick people with the following disclaimer. We do not only represent skinny people, nor only white people, nor only bald people, but unless otherwise noted to be a particular historic figure, we are generic stick people representing humans of every shape, age, ethnicity, race, and gender. And we tell the story because at our core, we are all the same. And many people wonder where knowledge comes from. And in the status quo, scientists make knowledge inside this black box. And then science communicators translate and deliver the new knowledge into the everyday language of the stick people, the humans. So here's a scientist coming out saying, here's new research on avian olfactory receptor gene repertoires, which is the title of a paper of a colleague of mine. Does anybody know what that means? Right, birds can smell. Or they have the genetic capacity to smell. But with citizen science, we tear down the black box and we work together because we have a lot in common. We all make observations. We all are curious. We can all experiment. We all think and wonder. We are all creative. We are all motivated for discovery. We all enjoy doing things, especially outside. And we all like to share what we know in one way or another. And when we're faced big problems, being handed scientific knowledge is actually not enough. And I mean, it is huge to have those scientific knowledge, so I don't want to downplay that. And if we think historically, humanity has progressed really by reducing restrictions on the spread of knowledge. And we can think back to the days of the church controlling knowledge. And I'm just going to briefly go, like 1553, Michael Servetus. He was the first guy to correctly describe how our pulmonary system worked and how blood flowed between the heart and the lungs. But he wrote it in a book called The Restoration of Christianity. And so John Calvin, it was considered heresy, and they took what they thought was the last copy of the book, they tied it to his leg, they tied him to a post, and they burned him alive. And so when my peers complain about getting a peer-reviewed paper rejected, I say, don't complain, because it used to be much worse if people didn't like what you did. So anyway, his work did survive and is actually the foundation of the Unitarian Church. But Galileo, almost a century later, under house arrest until he died because he subscribed to the Copernican view of the solar system, right? So we now, think that we can spread knowledge, but it's still, this open access movement is a really big deal right now. And people might remember Aaron Swartz. He went on, in 2011, he went on to MIT's campus, and he went behind what's called JSTOR, which is a paywall where all the scientific knowledge is behind that, but you have to pay to access it, unless you're at the library. And he went there and he started downloading it all, because he was going to make, it was a political statement to make all knowledge available. He said it's a moral obligation to not have to pay to access knowledge. They threw the book at him. And so after 2 years of legal stuff and no plea bargain, he was facing a huge amount of jail time. It's really sad he committed suicide. But around that same time, Alexandra Elbyankin, I don't know how to say her name, she has a site, and you can go and get any article you want. It's called Sci-Hub. And there's all these court orders and injunctions to close down her site. But the server's in Russia, and they're just thumbing their nose. They're saying no way. But anyway, so it's like this huge controversy still about our access to knowledge, right? But anyway, so my point with citizen science is we're not even just talking about knowledge from scientists. We're saying, let's open up the systems of knowledge production and who is making that knowledge and who can make it, which is even more powerful. And so, because we need each other and that social capital to make those discoveries and to use the knowledge for solutions. So that program that Matthew Murray Fontaine Murray started It actually never ended. He started it in the mid-1800s. It continues to this day. It's run by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, not known for citizen science, because nobody calls it citizen science because sailors do it. And I just like to emphasize that, because it became so embedded in the lives of sailors. Of course they shared their observations because they knew someone would sail after them and it would make those people's journeys safer. And I think that's sort of the paradigm of citizen science becoming so mainstream that of course we all make observations and of course we should all share them because there's always someone coming after us. So thank you. Sorry I went over.